Welcome to the Lifestyle Builders Podcast, where we bring you real-life strategies on starting and growing a business and finding financial freedom without sacrificing the life you have with your loved ones. We are your hosts, Tom and Ariana Sylvester, and we are married, we're parents, and we're serial entrepreneurs. This podcast is for those who want more out of life. We'll show you how to take the vision you have and create the business that will help you achieve it. Join us as we share practical steps, real-life stories, and help you become a lifestyle builder. All right, so today we are talking about how to stop learning so much and actually start implementing. And I know this sounds kind of counterintuitive, like everyone should always be learning, which you should. But I think when it comes to business, people get so stuck in that learning loop that they're just like, oh, I got to learn all the things and get all the knowledge.
Yeah, well, I mean, so here's the thing. Like, if you want to be successful, you should be a lifelong learner. Like, no doubt about that. Mm-hmm. But what we find a lot of people get into is they get stuck, for multiple reasons, into just continuously learning and not taking action on it. And here's the thing. You can have all the knowledge in the world, but if you're not putting that knowledge to use, you're missing out on a big part of the benefit of having that knowledge.
For me, it's funny because I used to be such a big reader, and everyone finds that out. And then they're like, well, why is Tom the one reading all the business books? And like, you don't read anymore. And I have to explain to them, like, I never read for knowledge. I enjoyed reading for pleasure. And I actually read very, very quickly. I almost was like speed reader level when I read books for pleasure. And everyone's like, oh, well, couldn't you just like do that for learning? And you could just read so many books and learn so much stuff. The problem is I actually don't learn when I read because I read so fast that I can't pull the concept. Like, I often forget what I've read because I read it so quickly that I haven't had a chance to like let it seep into my brain. Yeah. So what business book reading is really difficult for me because I have to go back and read
Well, but it's very different to read for fun versus reading for learning. Like, when you're reading for fun, you're picking it up, but you're not trying to take it in, understand, process it. Where with business reading or anytime you're learning, you got to take that idea in, you got to think about what it is, you got to tie it to what you already know. So it's two very different types.
Yeah, and I tend to be more of a, I guess, I don't even know if there's a term for this. When it comes to learning things in the business, if it's learning a skill or learning a specific thing that I have to do, that I'm really good at just like going out, finding that, learning it, and then actually like turning around and doing it because I'm learning something that I want to do right then and there. When it comes to like the personal development or like the learning in the mindset area and some of that stuff, I actually don't read or like listen to podcasts very often because I find that I learn things better by kind of like living them. Like going through them. Oftentimes I'll talk to you about stuff and we kind of have like open conversation about those topics. I kind of have more of an observant learner, I guess.
Well, so that's the key thing. Everybody learns differently. Like, some people learn by reading, some people learn by listening. One of the things, like, when I run like live training classes is I try to hit on all of those elements of it, so a visual for people that do it that way, or something they can read, or a handout for people that need to read it. Obviously, I'm talking so they hear it. But the key thing that I like to do with all of those, because regardless of which type you learn, is having people actually experience it. Mm-hmm. And sometimes, like, there's the term is called a vicarious experience. This is why storytelling is so powerful, because even if you haven't experienced something, somebody that tells a really good story, they give you the feelings and the emotions of living that story, even though you didn't do it, just because they're a very good storyteller. Mm-hmm. So to your point, it's important for us to all to know like how we learn best, but at the end of the day, it's the implementation or the experiencing of it that usually solidifies it for us.
Maybe that's why I like talking to people.
Absolutely. It's a big thing. And, that's one of the things
I learned vicariously.
Yeah. Well, and ultimately, like, I forget what the studies and stuff were, but they talk about like how much you retain if you hear it versus read it versus whatever. And usually the way to make sure you really understand it and retain it the most is by sharing that with somebody else. Mm-hmm. Because in order for you to be able to tell tell somebody else about it. You've got to be able to bring it in, process it, understand it, and then articulate it back.
Well, and I was always have been one of those people who I was able to retain much better if I actually took notes and wrote stuff down. I could watch a PowerPoint presentation 6 times and not get the concepts in there. But as soon as I took pen to paper and started taking notes, writing down like things that I wanted to remember, then I would retain it. So I remember people, you in college used to pick on me all the time because I would like go and study for a test. Oftentimes, I didn't have to study that hard because I had taken notes throughout the semester, and just reviewing my notes reminded me of all of those things that I had learned enough that I didn't really need to cram. I just had like my little study time that I would take before the test, and then that was it. And I usually got, really good grades on my tests because of that. But it was that act of I had to have written those things down and actually like processed them in order for my brain to retain that knowledge. And then I was kind of almost just doing a review when it came time for the tests.
Yeah, well, and so, what we want to talk about today, we've gotten into a little bit of like how we do it, but we want to give you guys a framework for how you can not only incorporate learning into your life every single day, but a process to make it more automatic, a process to actually have you implement it so that you're going through that whole cycle and you can be a continuous learner without having learning or the time to do that take over your life and take away from the action that we actually want you to take.
Yep. Yeah. So the first step is to really make learning a habit, which sounds a little harder than you would expect to make learning a habit.
Yeah. Well, so here's the thing. We all make decisions every day. Like, I don't even know the number, but I mean, we probably make tens of thousands of decisions. But most of them are automatic, right? Like, most people don't think very much about brushing your teeth, or even like think about when you're driving, like how many things just happen automatically for you. And what you want to do is actually make learning be something like that. Habits are so powerful, habits and routines. And, there's a book, actually, this is the book for the bookshelf, but I'll introduce it earlier. It's called The Power of Habit. But there's a really cool thing that they have in this book called the habit loop. And essentially, they break every habit down into 3 sections. The cue or the trigger, basically what triggers that habit to happen, the routine or what you do once that cue happens, and then the reward, what you get for doing that. And so by thinking about that, what you can really do is with any habit, we're going to use it for learning, but you can use it to get rid of habits, to introduce new habits, is to use this routine to help you make learning a habit every single day.
Mm-hmm. And so with this one, you're introducing what is called a habit loop, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So that's figuring out what cues you into doing something that you automatically do, and then that action, and then the almost like the reward of what you get at the end of that loop.
Yep. And so like, for example, I like to do my learning every day at the beginning of the day. And so part of what cues me into learning is usually drinking my coffee. And when I drink my coffee, just mentally I'm thinking about, all right, well, I got to read a book, or I've got to, check out a blog post or whatever. And then, the satisfaction that I get was that I was able to drink the coffee. I learned something new. And, that's part of kind of my routine now. Now, like we talked about at the beginning, you might learn best from reading a book. I read a lot of books. Some people might learn from podcasts or from something else. So the key thing here is just figuring out for you, what is that routine, or what is something that you're already doing, and then swapping out the routine for that. A lot of people will listen to podcasts while they're commuting to work. Mm-hmm. Or while they're taking their kids to daycare, or whatever, or while they're working out. So the key thing is just really, and there's a lot more about how to do this in that book, but really thinking about that and how you can apply it. And then once you do, it's going to take a little bit of time to create a habit out of it, but you'll find that you'll get to a certain point where you're not even really thinking much about it. You just kind of do it.
Yeah. I definitely do not have a morning learning habit.
Yeah, well, and
I'm just going to be straight up about that.
Yeah, and I'll tell you guys, to be honest, this is one of the most powerful things that I've done, I think, towards success. So I introduced this habit years ago when I was consulting, and even before I started consulting, when I was just working in a company.
Yeah.
Because what I would do, this actually came about when I was taking my master's. I would go to class, or I would go to work all day, and I would go to class at night, and we would learn a new concept in class. And then what I would do is I would apply that concept at work the next day. A lot of times it didn't go well because I didn't know enough about the concept. But then when I came back to class the next week, I would kind of share my experiences. I would learn from that, and then I would apply it again. So I did that kind of weekly while I was getting my master's. And then eventually I got to the point where I was like listening to podcasts or audiobooks every day. I would hear like 20 minutes of an audiobook, and maybe it would be about how to have a better conversation with somebody, or how to introduce a scoreboard, whatever the topic was. And then when I got to work, I would say, all right, let me apply that thing I just learned today. And so what that allows you to do is you get this really quick feedback loop of you learn something, you try it, you reflect on it, and then you learn again. So what this will allow people to do is, a lot of people, like there's a great quote about experience where, some people say, well, I have 20 years of experience. Well, if you did the same thing every year for 20 years, you don't really have 20 years of experience. You have 1 year of experience that you repeated 20 times. Mm-hmm. But the way that I've been able to hack learning is to be able to take a new concept or idea, implement it, learn from it, and do that every day, and do that on a very fast cycle. So a lot of people, like when we were younger and we were having success, a lot of people were like, how have you guys achieved so much success and you're so young? And basically it's because I figured out how to learn and implement this way faster than anyone else. So what would take somebody else maybe years to do, I could do in the matter of like weeks or months.
And I think oddly enough, that's what has allowed me to learn a lot, is because I'm doing that vicarious learning through you a lot of times, where I watch you do something, or I listen to how you word something, and it's kind of like I'm, now I can't think of the word right now, osmosis, where I'm.
There you go.
Yeah.
Look at you using that college education.
I had my morning chai this morning. So it's kind of like I'm taking what you learned and then you implemented, but I'm observing it from my perspective, and then the next time I actually take it and implement it differently based on myself. So I think that's why I don't learn as well from like reading and listening, because I need to see things like in real time and to be able to ask questions. Like sometimes we'll have really open discussions about like, hey, I saw this video on Facebook and it was like talking about this, and like, I don't really know how I feel about it. And then we have a discussion about it, and I've got my perspective of things, and I've got my experiences that I've had. But I think just talking about it, like having that trigger of, hey, this is different, this is new, and then being able to ask you like what you think about it, or what experiences have you had with that particular situation. And that's really how I learn, and how I've been able to grow is by taking what I had and then kind of adding yours on, and like making it this cool merging of, oh, okay, so it's different, based on different people and different life experiences. And, it's kind of helped me to look at things differently and to go at problems differently, just based on all those little pieces of osmosis over the years. But I think that's helpful for me, because a lot of times I get stuck with the perfectionism. Mm-hmm. And so like when I read books, it's very tough to think about things differently and to like think about different concepts in there, because I'm reading that book and I'm like, all I can see is what they just talked about in there. And then it's like, oh, well, now I have to think about it this way instead of like how I used to think about it. Whereas if I'm doing little pieces here and there, I'm able to meld those together better and not feel so much pressure for things to be so perfect.
Yeah, well, and this is where the quote of, you are the average of the 5 people that you hang around with, that term is perfect, osmosis, because, if you're around people, you're going to start absorbing what they're doing and what they're seeing. And like one of the biggest things that I do with people, and oftentimes they don't like it initially, is I just force them to take action. Mm-hmm. And I'm not looking for the result. I'm just looking for action, because here's the thing. If you take action every day, if you're trying stuff out, you're going to fail more than other people do. But here's the thing, you're going to learn way faster than all those people do. And this is where, like, I think the difference between like you and I my personality type, I'm a fast start. I'm just going to go try something. I'm not worried if it works or doesn't work, but I'm interested in learning from it because I know if I try something and it works, I'm going to do more of it. If I try something and it doesn't work, I move it out of this way and I try something else. But to your point, if you're more of like a fact finder or more of a perfectionist, it can be hard to do that. And here's the challenge: people like you, sounds
people
terrible,
like me.
but you can sometimes get caught into learning a lot but not implementing. And this is where, unfortunately, we find a lot of people where they can recite and tell you all the information, but they haven't actually done a lot of it. So then when you ask them a question, okay, well, what do you do in this scenario? They don't really know because they haven't taken the action on it. And that's where having the knowledge plus the action combined together and having that experience is so powerful.
Yeah, I think that's why we work so well together, because honestly, I probably would not have taken action on many things over the years because I would be waiting for all the facts and all the details, and I would want to make sure that I knew all the things I needed to know, and I would want things to be perfect, and like that's just kind of how my personality was. Yep. And over the years, having each other to kind of check in has allowed me to kind of step away from that perfectionism a little bit and be a little bit more of a risk taker at times and try new things and be like, okay, it's fine if it doesn't work, we'll just try something else. But I think that was part of the growth that I had to do, and that was part of my osmosis learning that I had to do through you to see that that's okay. That I can learn things piece by piece, I can grow little by little, and we just keep taking on the next thing.
Yeah, well, and I think what's cool about that too is, and we try to do this a lot with like our lifestyle builders and with our clients, is I wonder if that's a term, osmosis learning, because it's
probably
such a great.
Should be.
I was gonna say it's such a great way to describe it. So, we share experiences with people and we teach them a lot of what we know, but then we also kind of, what we always say is like pull back the curtain and we show what's actually going on with us. So one of the things we do is a weekly review, and we reflect on what went well, what didn't go well, and then kind of share that back. And I think that's why a lot of people get a lot of benefit out of like those types of things that we do with lifestyle builders, because they might not have experienced what we're experiencing. Maybe we're at a different level with business, or maybe we have a different type of business. But as we share those lessons and those things we learn, they learn vicariously through us, and hopefully we're able to save them some of the steps along the way, if they're taking that to heart.
Well, and I love now that we've started doing that post within our Lifestyle Builders community of the weekly reviews every week on Fridays. And now it's not just us sharing our experiences of, hey, this worked, this didn't work. It's everyone else in there. So now we're getting like osmosis learning across like 30 different people, which is awesome.
Well, and that's really the power of like a mastermind. If you, are part of a mastermind, you're going to get direct experiences from what, you're asking questions on or whatever else. But hearing all those other people and what they're doing and how they're approaching it, it's amazing how much you can get from something like that. All right.
Pause. We got a package coming.
We'll just keep going.
All right. Hopefully they don't knock on the door. All right. So we talked about learning a new habit. We talked about kind of implementing what you're learning daily. But what we didn't talk about is how to find the time for that learning. And I know you talked about part of your habit is learning in the morning when you have your coffee, but you've actually gone a step further and put that on your calendar, that's your learning time. And I know a lot of people kind of struggle with like just throwing it in here and there throughout the day, or like maybe you leave it till the end and then you don't have time, or you don't have the brain power to go and do that learning. Being very intentional about like, I am going to learn at this time and having that habit, then you don't really have to worry about that so much.
Yeah, well, and so the key thing here, so habits are good, but habits tend to be individual things. The real power comes when you have a habit and you string a bunch of habits together into a routine. And people have routines all the time. Whether you intentionally plan it or not, you have stuff that you do every day.
Yep.
Right? You have, when you wake up, you do a certain set of things. At night, you do a certain set of things. When you make dinner, you do a certain set of things. So the power is really creating those routines for yourself and then really tweaking them or optimizing them to work for you.
Yep.
So there's a book out there called The Miracle Morning. which talks a lot about this. And, you know, if you're not a morning person, I don't want you to have that title.
Hello.
Yeah, I don't want you to have that title turn you off. But the key is we were talking earlier about all those decisions. You want to make as many decisions automatic as possible because you want to save your decisions for the things that really require thought. And if you're essentially wasting your decisions on all these small things, well, should I wear a white shirt or should I wear a black shirt or should I wear a red shirt? The more decisions you have, you can actually get something called decision fatigue, where you basically have used up all your brain power on decisions that don't matter. And then when you get to the things that you want to use it for, you don't have any left. So as much as you can, you want to actually create these routines that take the thought process out of it so that you get through the things you need to, and then you have that thought process later on. So for me, my morning routine, like, it's down pat. Like, I get up, I know what I'm doing. And then I also use other tools that help me as well. Putting it on the calendar helps remind me. But like, here's a great example. Like, when I work out, I follow a workout routine called 5x5. I actually have an app on my phone that guides me through the workout. It says, Tom, there's two different types of workouts. There's an A workout and a B workout. It says it's Monday, you're doing the A workout. Your first set of workout is squats. You're squatting 300 pounds today. Here's your warm-up routine. Here's what plates go on which side of the bar. So I'm not even calculating how much that is. Here's your warm-up sets. You're going to lift this. You're going to do 5 of them, and there's going to be a 1.5-minute break in between it. So when you indicate you're done, it's going to have a 1.5-minute timer, and then it's going to ding and tell me I got to do the next one. I literally don't think about my workout at all. But by doing that, I do it every day. It's a habit that I have. And when I go to start the day, not only am I energized and fresh and ready to go, like in the zone, but I haven't used a lot of thought. So now I can put that thought into the things that I've got to do that day.
Yeah, I think, and that's a great point. We do make a lot of I sometimes think that I struggle with decision fatigue.
There's a reason. Be honest. There's a reason I wear black shirt every day. Like, I've started, you know, and you know, you don't have to go like as crazy as me or other people, but the more you can take some of those things out of your day, just the easier it is.
Yeah. I've been trying to be better with decision making, and one of my struggles is I need to delegate decision making more often, which I've started doing to you. So I'm taking some of your decision making. But part of it too, I think having that scheduled time to learn is going to keep you from spending too much time learning.
Yep.
Because oftentimes people will like get in the zone and they're reading a really good book and they want to just keep going, or they're listening to an amazing podcast and they want to keep going and just like binge listen. But having that time specifically set out on your calendar gives you that little reminder of like, hey, you've got other stuff that you've got to get done today. So here's your learning time, and realize if you need to extend your learning time that you're cutting into some of your other time. So you're either not getting the tasks done that you wanted to for your business, you're not getting those ROI wow, I cannot think of the word. I just thought of osmosis and now I'm blank. My brain is like, nope, you're done.
Yeah, did you make too many decisions this morning?
Your ROI creating tasks. If you're spending too much time learning, you're not doing that other stuff, which means your business isn't moving forward. So that's part of, I think, putting it on the schedule too, is telling yourself like, hey, even though you may love to learn, you've got a specific amount of time that you told yourself this was what you're going to spend learning, and then you're supposed to go implement. So don't just, get sucked into the hole of learning.
Yeah, well, and, if people have done the time audit that we've recommended like 20 million times on this podcast, one of the things we recommend is you do the time audit, you analyze it, and then you create really your ideal week, and you set blocks of time away. And you make a really good point. Part of putting it on the calendar is to make sure that you do it, because if you don't schedule it, it's very easy for something else to take that time. But then the other part of it is to say, only do as much of it as you need.
Yeah.
One of the concepts I really like to talk about is, what's the minimum required input to get a result? So for example, what's the least amount of time I can work out and achieve my goals? Because if I can get something done in a half hour compared to somebody else that spends an hour and a half and we get the same result, or maybe they're a little bit better than me, but they had to spend 3 times as much time, I'd rather spend the least amount.
Yep.
So same thing when it comes to reading. Like, what's the least amount that I can read, or what's the least amount that I can learn that I can then go take action and get a result? Because if you and I are, both in business, in our own businesses, and I can read 10 pages, implement, and get a result, and then I move on to the next thing, and you got to read the entire book, I'm going to beat you day and night because I don't have to take as much time.
Yep.
So you always want to look at like, the minimum viable or the minimum effective requirements, and then try to do the least amount. Like, side story, when I was in college...
You and your side story.
I know. So the first class, my undergrad was in computer science. And so I remember going to my first computer science class.
Nerd.
And I was like a self-taught, like I taught myself how to like
Code.
program and all that stuff, but I had never done it officially. So I was nervous when I got to this class, and we had the first night, they gave us a homework assignment. We had to like code something, print it out, and bring it back in. So I got into the class the next day, and everyone had like stacks of papers, and I had like one sheet with like 5 lines of code on it. And I'm like, oh crap, I'm not cut out for this like programming stuff because I clearly did it wrong. And so we go through, and I'm all nervous. I'm like, man, I just spent all this money on college and it's not going to work out. And the professor like calls me up. It makes me show my thing and explain it. And he's like, this is great. He's like, this is phenomenal. And I'm like, it is? He's like, yeah. And he's like, Tom, why do you only have one sheet when everyone else has a lot? And I said, well, I didn't want to write out all of those sheets. And basically what I did was said, instead of repeating the same thing over and over again, I figured out how to make it so I could do less of it. And basically I said, I'm going to be honest, I'm lazy. I didn't want to spend all that time. So I figured out a creative way around it. And what he said, I know you're going to be successful because you're looking for the most efficient way to do something. Mm-hmm. And that's what I want people to think about is, how can you spend the least amount of time and get the same result? And what I always challenge people on is, okay, if you can do this in an hour, how do we get it done in 45 minutes? Because if you keep cutting that down, and you don't want to cut it down to where you're only spending 5 minutes and you're not getting it, but if you can find that optimum point, like that's how you achieve high performance.
Yeah. And, part of that's being intentional about it too. Like you talked about being efficient with how you're spending that time, how you're getting the same results of that learning, but in a smaller amount of time. It's also about being intentional about what you're actually learning. So don't go and learn how to code if you're not building your own custom website and you don't need that knowledge. Like so many of us are just drawn to that thought of, if I learn all of this stuff, then I am going to be successful. When in most cases, you only need to learn the next thing that you need to do in your business. Like you don't have to go and learn every single thing about business under the sun. First of all, it's going to overwhelm you. There's so much knowledge out there. Second of all, you don't need to learn those things at this point in time. You're at a certain level. Only go and learn the things that you need to get to the next level.
Yep. And that's such a key point. And I love when somebody comes and says, hey, Tom, what book should I read? Like, Tom, you've read thousands of books.
That's Tom's trigger.
Tell me the one book I should read. And my first question back is, well, what's the next thing you're trying to do? Because I see people all the time that they'll just read and read and read. And a couple of challenges with this. One, you're spending a lot of time on that. Mm-hmm. If you're buying all these books, you're spending a lot of money. But the probably the most important thing is you're actually splitting your focus and not making it very clear on what out of all that stuff you just read you need to implement. Mm-hmm. And if you're reading a bunch of stuff but not implementing, you're going to lose so much of the knowledge. But the real key here is, like, let's say, for example, the next thing we need to do is to we're going to implement marketing on LinkedIn, right? So you shouldn't be going out and reading a general marketing book or a sales book or something else. You should go and say, I need to learn how to market on LinkedIn. So I'm going to listen to a podcast. I'm going to buy a course. I'm going to read a book to tell me how I can do that. And then when I start reading that, I'm going to go and do it, right? Because that is the fastest and most efficient way. And then what it also does is it doesn't give you that shiny object syndrome, or it doesn't pull in other ideas or thoughts that don't directly contribute to what you're trying to do.
Well, that's what I was going to say too. Like, so many people get shiny object. They see so-and-so's reading a book, or like they see an influencer that suggests a book out to someone, and they're, oh, I got to read that book. Well, is that book something that is necessary for you to learn in order to reach the next goal that you've set out for yourself? Because part of being intentional with your learning is connecting all of that back to those goals that you've set for yourself and for your business. Like, what do you need to do in the next 90 days to get to the point you told yourself you wanted to be at? Don't read any books that don't connect into that set of goals, that set of tasks and priorities. Like, you don't need to distract yourself with shiny object thinking like, oh, well, so-and-so said I need to read this book, so I need to read this book. No, you need to put that book on your list of books that you eventually want to read. Yep. And say, here's the topic that book's about. When I get to a point where I need to learn more about that, I've automatically got a book on my recommendation list.
I was going to say, and that last point you hit on is so critical, because you're going to come across good stuff every day, but something that's really good, but you don't need right now, makes it less good. But if you can flag that, like if you can throw that in Evernote or wherever you collect things, tag it with something, tag it with marketing. Then when you go back and you say, okay, I'm done with this thing. Now I need more marketing. Let me go and search everything I've collected. So you're capturing it, but you're not focusing on it right away.
Yep.
And one of the most important things for entrepreneurs is to focus and to create the environment so where you don't have distractions. Like, for example, if you get a ton of emails, not only is it going to be overwhelming, but it's going to distract you, and you're going to start seeing things that don't directly contribute to what you're trying to do. So one of the best things you can do is set your environment up to reduce those distractions. And once you do that, it's going to allow you so much more focus and make sure that you only are seeing the things at the right times you need to see them.
Yeah, I love that. So one of my homeworks for this week is to look at how your current habits are kind of running your day. So looking at the things that you commonly do, like I know Tom's got his morning routine. Some people absolutely love and live for their morning routines. If you're one of those people, like, what is your morning routine? What does that consist of? What habits do you have in there? And are they all things that are kind of contributing to the rest of your day and what you want to get out of it? If you're not a morning routine person, like, what habits do you have throughout the day that are either contributing to your productiveness or taking away from it? And just kind of identifying all those. Yeah.
And so for me, my homework for you guys is, one, figure out when is the best time for you to learn. It might be, I truly believe that doing it in the morning or before you get to your other stuff is the best. That doesn't mean you have to do it at 5 a.m. If you wake up at 8 or 10 or whatever time. But I like to learn before I start my day so that I can then implement immediately what I learned. So figure out when you want to learn. And then for the next week, spend some time each day learning something that is going to help you for that week. So if you're going to go and, whatever you're implementing, whatever your next goal is, figure out an activity or something, a book that's going to help you with that. And then every day for the next week, during that time, learn from that thing and then spend some time that day implementing what you learned. And, let me know how that goes for you. You guys can leave a comment on the show notes page at tomandariana.com/show43. But let me know what it is that, when you're going to do it. Let me know what you actually did, and then let me know the results, because this is really powerful for people. And if you guys do this for a week, I promise you're going to get some really good results.
Yeah, I love it. If you loved the topic we talked about today, Tom actually wrote a blog post about this, dives a little bit deeper into some of the areas that we talked about, and you can find the link to that in the show notes page at tomandariana.com/43. What's the book you got? I see that. So, as I talked about running on a hamster wheel, I noticed that your book has a big wheel.
I was going to say subliminal messaging for you. So we already mentioned the book. It's called The Power of Habit. And this is a really good book. Actually, let's read the subtitle. Why We Do What We Do in Life and Business. And, this was actually, I read this relatively recently. I was going to say the last couple of months. It was kind of cool because it really breaks down a lot of the science behind habits. So it actually went into a lot of, it wasn't boring, but it went into different studies of like people that had issues with their brain, or they had parts of their brain that weren't working. And some of these people could really develop habits or couldn't develop habits based on that. And then it shows you kind of that habit loop that we talked about in here. And it gives you some really practical ways to implement this for you. But then what's kind of cool, it's broken up into 3 sections. And the later sections talk about business and then also talk about society. So you don't necessarily have to read the whole thing if you're just looking for the habits. But it's kind of cool that it ties it into a bigger thing. And like I said, if you can really turn some of these key things into habits, it's going to make a huge difference, not only in your business, but also in your life.
Yeah, I love it. All right. It's been another great episode with Tom and Ariana, your hosts and lifestyle builders.
And as always, it's your life, your business, your way. We'll see you next time.
Bye. Are you frustrated by a lack of momentum in your business? Do you want real-time guidance and support from seasoned entrepreneurs who really care about your results? If you're nodding your head, or awkwardly shouting yes in public somewhere, then we invite you to join Lifestyle Builders, a mentorship program designed to meet you where you are and give you strategic and custom guidance so you can build the business you need for the life you crave. You can find out more at joinlifestylebuilders.com.
Your life, your business, your way. Join Family Entrepreneur Life. Join Family Entrepreneur